Hello everyone and welcome back to .NET Core Central. In my last few videos, I have been talking about a NuGet package for Coravel. In my first video, I started with describing or explaining how we can very easily schedule job using Coravel. In the next one, I showed how we can queue existing job using Coravel. And then in my last video, I discussed how we can use caching framework of Coravel, mainly the in-memory cache. Plus, I have shown a couple of other NuGet package, which are extension of Coravel, can be used for using SQL Server and Postgres for using caching, and how you can extend Coravel very easily to write your own cache provider. In today's video, I am going to talk about another feature which is provided by the Coravel NuGet package is event broadcasting. Now, event broadcasting is very useful feature in general, and we try to achieve it using events and delegates and few other mechanisms like even reactive extension can be used for event broadcasting, but in a different way of implementation. Now here we are going to talk about plain and simple broadcasting of event. It is not point-to-point event. This is mainly broadcasting. So we'll have a broadcast and you can have multiple listeners listening to the same event and do their own thing. It has a concept of subscriber or listener, and then the event itself, which is used for communicating the data, and then the broadcaster, which is going to broadcast the event. So for doing event broadcasting, first we have to add the events to the services. Just like we added queue here, we have to do the same thing for event. So for that purpose, what we can do is we can do builder dot services dot add events, and this is going to add the event framework of Coravel into the dependency injection container. After we add event, next thing we have to do is we have to define the event, and we have to define a subscriber, and we have to broadcast the event. So first what we are going to do is we are going to add here an event class. So I can create internal class, and I can call it as weather event, weather event. And then weather event is going to implement the interface I event. And as you can see, the GitHub Copilot is already suggesting a code implementation. So I'm just going to tab it to accept the code. And for the I event, we have to add the interface, which is coravel.events.interfaces. I'm going to add that. So now the events namespace is also added, and I have the weather event class. So weather event class, as you can see, is very simple. It's a class which exposes a property, and then the value of the property is set through the constructor. And we're going to see how we can use it finally in our code. Next, this is where we want to add a listener, and listener is what is going to get the event, which is going to be set by the broadcaster, and the listener is then going to take that event and do some task. For our code example here, we're just going to do a console.writeLine, but you can do what you want to do with that event. You can do some post-processing, or you can use it to save it database asynchronously, whatever task you want to perform as a part of the event handler. So for defining the subscriber, we can create again internal class, and I can say weather event subscriber, and this can listen to, or this is going to implement the interface I listener, and it is a generic interface. And for the generic type here, we're going to type the original event type, or we are going to pass the original event type, which is weather event. So GitHub Copilot is already suggesting me the code, so I'm just going to tab it out. And here you can see that the I listener is part of Coravel.events.interface. And this is what we added. And then by default, it comes with the implementation of handle event async or handle async. And the handle async method will take the type which we pass here. In this case, is the weather event. And then inside of handle event, we are going to just write the console.write, and here we're going to just write the summary property of the weather event object and just returning a task dot completed task, because it is a function which returns a task. So here we have this, and now that we have both the classes defined, there are a couple of things we have to do. Now we written the listener, we have written the event itself, but we have to write the broadcasting also. So for broadcasting, what I can do is, instead of creating another method for the weather forecast itself, let's get rid of the IQ implementation, and instead here let's have the dispatcher. So I dispatcher, again, I dispatcher is part of Coravel.event.interfaces namespace. So we'll have the I dispatcher and dispatcher, and here let's get rid of these, and let's just do dispatcher dot, and you can see dispatcher has a broadcast method which takes a type T event. In our case, it is going to be weather event, and Copilot GitHub is already suggesting the implementation, so I'm just going to tab it out. So here we are saying we are broadcasting an event of type weather event, and for the summary of the weather event, we're just saying weather event broadcasted. So let's say weather event broadcasted. That's what we are saying here. Now there is a couple of other things we have to do. We have used the broadcaster or dispatcher to broadcast an event, and we also have an event as well as the event listener. Let's rename it to event listener to match the interface instead of event subscriber. Okay, now it matches the interface. So weather event listener. Now what we want to do is we want to add the weather event listener to the dependency injection, and instead of transient, I'm going to add it as singleton, because I want only one instance of that. Next, what we have to do is we have to attach or register the weather event into the Coravel framework, and we have to attach the subscriber. So for doing that, what we have to do is, after an app is created using the builder.build, we can do the app dot services dot configure event. So you see that the configure events, which is again an extension method and part of the Coravel framework, we can call that, and when we call that, the configure event method is going to return an I event registration object. So we can say var registration. So we got a I event registration. Now to the registration, what we can do is we can register the event and we can subscribe to the listener. So this is wrong syntax. I'm just going to remove. So for registering, we're saying, okay, register, you can see register is register an event for Coravel's dispatcher. So we register the weather event, and the register event sends or returns a I event subscription object. Here the configure event returned the event registration. Here this is returning event subscription. So now we can use this event subscription to subscribe. So what we want to subscribe? We want to subscribe to our listener. So for that we can do subscribe. And what is our listener? Our listener is weather event listener. So here what we are doing now, we subscribe the weather event listener to the Coravel framework. Now all our configuration is done. So what we did, we first added the events into the DI using add events. Then we created an event listener and an event. We added the event listener to the dependency injection container. And then after that, we have taken the web application object and the services, which is the service provider, and then we call the configure event extension method to get the event registration object. And then we registered the weather event to the event registration object, which returns a subscriber or subscription, and then to the subscription we subscribe the weather event listener. This is how we have now tied in the event to the event subscription. And now when anyone broadcasts this event here, for example, it will be given to the appropriate event listener, which is here. So now I'm going to run this code, and then I'm going to show in the console that the event is triggering when I'm going to use the Swagger to call the weather forecast. So this is the Swagger page. I'm going to come here. I'm going to try out the weather forecast, execute, came back with the standard response. And now if we look here, we can see the message that I printed as a part of the event listener. It says event received, weather event broadcasted. So as you can see, this is a very simple implementation of event broadcasting. And this can be, in my opinion, very handy and helpful in a lot of scenarios. So as I mentioned earlier, if you're using Coravel for creating or scheduling tasks very easily as a scheduler, then it makes sense using Coravel for both caching and event broadcasting, because all of them are coming part of the same NuGet package. So that is all I wanted to share for today's video. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you are new to this channel and you think you are getting value out of this channel, please subscribe to the channel. And thanks so much for watching this video.